Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today, we're going to talk about the buying process and what the steps are kind of very generally from having a buyer, having someone that you want to work with, all the way through actually closing and the steps that happen after this. And again, it's really not that difficult of a process. It just takes some getting used to. And the thing to remember is that I'm here, that the mentors are here, like Christine, like Suzanne, things like that, to help you through the process, right? And so it's important for you to get down these steps and get down what the flow looks like and the steps, step by step, because then you can explain it to people. And we'll talk a little bit about the buyer consultation, but being able to effectively communicate what the process is of working in New York City is so important for our clients because many people have never bought in New York before. Many of our buyers are first-time home buyers. Those who bought previously, it might have been, years, a decade, 20 years, 30 years since they bought their last property. And also, it's a different process than it is in other states. And so again, making sure you can effectively communicate this is one of the first steps to being able to work with buyers. So, before you take someone out, you really want to go over with them what this entire process is, right? And the most effective way of doing that is by doing a buyer consultation. Weichert has an amazing buyer consult, right? And we have it as a PDF file. I'll send it out to you guys again so you have a copy of it in the most recent version of it. But what this does is it allows us to talk to anyone, right? To talk to a potential buyer, be it a friend or family member, be it a lead that comes in off the internet, about what is happening with the market, what is happening with the sale process, and what the steps are from, again, start to finish, what we're going to be reviewing today, in order to really get what the journey is that they're going to be on from looking at properties to putting in an offer to the board process to the closing process and things like that. During the buyer consultation, you want to make sure that you are reviewing with people the agency disclosure form and the fair housing disclosure form, right? Again, these are not forms that tell anyone that they have to work with you. We don't really do exclusive buyer agency here in New York City. What the forms say are your relationship with the buyer and being able to tell the buyer, hey, I'm representing you. I am paid by the seller at closing and it's at no cost to you whatsoever, is a way that we convert some of these leads into people that really want to work with us, right? Because we're going the extra step, right? We're not just running around with a client, showing them properties and not telling them the process, right? We're sitting down with them in person over coffee at a listing or something like that. Or afterwards, even over Zoom or a virtual meeting and stuff like that, to explain to them what the steps are of buying. And again, that's really what we're going over today.
Hey, Jason. Hey, everybody on the call. Hey, where do we find the buyer? How do we get to that point?
To have buyers to work with?
Yeah.
That's a different step. We'll talk about that a little bit. We have a ton of different buyer lead sources at Weichert. We also have a number of marketing things that you can do kind of with Annabelle through the My Weichert system to prospect for potential buyers. And so we're not going to be talking about that specifically today, but we'll kind of hint on a couple of those things. But before you actually meet with a buyer, you need to know what the process is. And so that's why we're going over this today.
Of course. All right. Thanks, man.
During that consultation, you also want to confirm their pre-approval, right? Many times people get a lead over the phone and they'll say, oh, are you pre-approved, right? And that is an important thing to ask. My best practice is to really ask that when I meet them in person, right? The pre-approval verification should happen again during the buyer consultation. You should make sure that the pre-approval form has a price, a down payment, and the terms of the loan. Make sure that it's for the correct property type, right? And again, we have multiple property types here in New York City that often aren't found other places: condos, co-ops, single family, multifamily, or stuff like that. And based on what your buyer's potentially purchasing, the numbers are going to look different, right? A condo pre-approval and a co-op pre-approval often look a bit different. And so it's important to make sure that you know that the banker that they're working with and the person that they're working with has approved them for the correct property type. If they don't have a pre-approval, right? They say, oh, I haven't done that yet. You say, not a problem, right? It is not a problem whatsoever. And what I do is I say, I'm going to have my amazing colleague, Doug, give you a call. What time works for you? Right. And if you see what I did there, I don't say, here's Doug's card, give him a call. I say, Doug is going to call you because it is much more likely that Doug is going to give them a call than they're going to call Doug. What I say is, here's his phone number, put it in your phone. What time works for you? I'll set it up. You call Doug, you give him the information, you tell him kind of what they're looking at, and he kind of takes the next steps, right? If they say, oh, I'm working with Chase Bank, oh, I'm working with Wells Fargo, whatever it is, say, not a problem. Do you have a banker there yet? And if they say no, have someone at that bank, right? I currently work with a number of people, right? I have people at Chase, at Wells Fargo, at TD Bank, people that I trust and I know will do a great job for my clients. And if you don't have that, just let me know, right? If they say, hey, I'm going to use Chase, not a problem. I'm going to get you in touch with someone over there. And again, you can do the same thing. You also want to introduce people to the revenue financial statement, right? And what the revenue financial statement is an asset and liability form. And it's a very simple form to fill out. We have it as an Excel file. So again, people can do it on their computers. And it basically just goes over, generally speaking, their financials. This form is needed, and we'll see this in a couple steps, anytime you're working with a co-op, right? Anytime you have a purchaser who's looking to buy a co-op, it's not only the owner that has to accept the offer, but the building has to accept the person's financials. And so by introducing it to them up front, it makes it so, again, in a couple steps, we're going to be ready. And again, some of these things might not make sense right away because, again, it's a little chicken and egg thing here with introducing things, kind of like Anthony was saying, right? Well, where do we get the buyers to do this with? But we'll go over that in good time. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to start looking at apartments, right? And again, my best practice is when I'm sending people apartments, I tend to send 5 or 6 listings at a time. And the reason for that is you really want to get people's feedback and you want to know why they don't want to see something, right? I tell all my clients, it's equally important if you don't like something to tell me why you don't like it, because that helps me refine down better, right? Many people say, oh, just tell me what you want to see, tell me what you like. But if they say, oh, this kitchen's way too small, that tells me that I need to be looking at things with larger kitchens and things like that. I also tend to keep track on a Google sheet, and while I'm seeing apartments with a active client, I keep track on a Google sheet of everything that we've seen, right? And that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, you can keep track of what sold when the contract, just in case they decide to go back and they want to see something again. This helps to shape what is happening on the market, right? I can say, oh, remember last weekend we went out and saw 7 properties. Well, 6 of them are in contract right now, or 6 of them have accepted offers. Look how quickly the market's moving, right? And that's, again, to keep track of not only the properties they like and don't like, but what's generally happening with the market. And every neighborhood, every property type has a different kind of market. We have great tools to keep track of that with Urban Digs, with OLR, with other databases and things like that. But it's a great way to keep track of things. The other thing that, and again, I put this on this page, is that, oftentimes people, especially ones who are moving from New Jersey, from Long Island, they're used to doing an inspection when they buy a property, right? And an inspector at some point comes in and looks at the building, right? They check out the foundation, the roof, the systems of the building, boiler, the heater system, all of that stuff. In New York City, because we're primarily, and again, not all the time, but we're primarily dealing with condos and co-ops, most of those systems are kept by the building and not the individual owner, right? Most co-ops will have a big water tank, which is for the whole building. They pay for the roof, the hallways, the facade, all of these things, right? And so many times buyers in New York City don't do an inspection because really all the inspector's looking at is the kitchen and maybe the bathroom, right? There's really not much they can do. See if there's any mold, those kind of things. If they want an inspection, they can totally do one. And we've got a great inspector. We have multiple inspectors that we can recommend. The thing to know is that you should do the inspection if they want one before an offer is submitted. And that's kind of the next step that we're getting to, or between the offer being accepted in the contract, right? If you're dealing with buyers who are coming from other places like New Jersey, usually what happens is you see something, you put in an offer, you sign a contract, and then you do the inspection, right? And you potentially renegotiate the deal based on what the inspection brought back. We do all the negotiation before the contract is signed. And again, that's why we do the inspections a little bit earlier. So if they're really interested in something and they're thinking about putting in an offer, do an inspection, because then you can use that material to craft your offer. And that's kind of the next step that we're going to get to. Again, these are some of the pages of the buyer consultation. And this is what we use to really go through with our potential buyers what the process is. And again, this page here is towards the end. We call it kind of like the the Candyland map, so all these little pictures and stuff like that. It goes through everything. And again, we start with the buyer consultation and we go all the way through the closing. And again, that's kind of what we're going over today so that you can do it during the buyer consultation. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. But I just wanted to show you guys again what a REBNY financial statement looks like. Again, it's a very simple asset liability form. The clients will fill this out, they sign it, and this will be put in with any offer, which is kind of what we're talking about next. So again, you have been working with your clients, you've taken them out, you've seen 10 apartments, you've seen a million apartments, hopefully not that many, but one of the important things to remember is that most people take a number of months to actually find something they want. And I'll use a very real life example. Karen, one of our agents, Suzanne's daughter, an amazing agent here in the Soho office, she has been working with buyers for the last 3.5 years, right? She's been working with the same people for 3.5 years, showing them properties. There have been times when they've been more and less active, but she has stayed in touch with these people for 3.5 years. And they now have an accepted offer on a property, which is almost double the price that they were originally looking at, right? And so again, Zach, who's on this call right now, took out a buyer from Op City. They saw one place, they put in an offer, they closed on it, right? So that's to say there's a huge range of things, right? Suzanne and I have been working with one client for over 10 years now. And we put in offers on places, she didn't get it. We had an accepted offer. We had a board turn down on that offer and stuff like that. But we're still kind of working with her, right? And so this is to say that the home buying process is a varied one. You might have people you take out and see 1 or 2 properties and they buy something. You might have other people that you take out for years and they don't buy anything, right? That's okay, right? And that's part of the process. And every time you see a property, every time you take someone out, you're learning more about the market, right? And so don't get discouraged by the fact sometimes it takes longer, right? I always say to my clients, and again, it's not something you have to say, but I am here for you for the long haul, right? To me, if you find something the first week, the first month, the first year, it doesn't matter. I don't want to put pressure on you. I'm here through your whole journey so that at the end of it, you're going to use me when you go and sell this property and you're going to refer me to your friends and family, right? And by using that tactic, for me, it's been very successful in my business, right? Because people don't feel pressure that they might, oh, I'm wasting Jason's time, oh, I'm doing these other things, right? I have other people I take out for 2 weekends and they buy something. So again, it all equals out in the end, but it's a great business to be in. And again, I kind of digressed a little bit there, but so again, you've taken them out. Let's hope it's in the first weekend or two and they found something that they really love, right? That is a great step. The next thing that you need to do is submit an offer to the seller's agent and negotiate, right? So the first offer is always in writing, and it's going to include the terms of the deal. And the terms include a few things, right? The price, what are they paying for it? The financing, what percentage are they putting down? And what percentage are they obtaining financing for? And again, in the example we'll see on the next page, my client was putting down 20% and financing 70%. An important thing to remember is that different buildings and different property classes have different down payment requirements. I'm going to use a very general number, and again, this is not always the case, but usually condos require 10% down payment and 90% financing can happen, right? Others require 20% down. Most co-ops require 20% down. That is not to say you won't find a condo that requires 30% down, or you won't find a co-op that might take 10% down, right? It's important again, and all the time in the listings, it usually always says it. You can confirm that. Again, most of the time with a co-op, you're putting down 20%. Most of the time with a condo, you could put down 10, but in New York, again, I know Wells Fargo right now in New York City, you have to put down 20% to buy a condo. It's just what's going on with the banking world right now. Other things you want to include in this letter are any inclusions, right? What is staying in the apartment, right? Maybe the owner said, well, I don't know if I want to sell the chandeliers, right? All fixtures usually stay with the apartment unless they're specifically included or excluded. But your buyer might be like, you know what, I really, really, really want that lamp. I want that as part of the deal. In New York, again, the appliances, the dishwasher, the washer dryer, if there is one, those things are almost always included unless the seller says, I'm taking my washer dryer with me, right? But 99% of the time it's included. What your target closing date is, right? And this is, again, another thing that you can kind of work with, right? If they're ready to close as soon as they can, that could be great for the seller. If the seller says, hey, I don't want to close till June, and your buyers are okay not closing till June, put that in your offer, right? And again, we'll see in the example. You want to include their name, where they live, their vital information, maybe a short little bio. Again, I can tell you that sometimes, and especially when you're talking about someone's primary residence, including a little letter to the seller or a letter about the people can help. And I'll use this example that I had. I was working with a buyer who was looking to purchase in Brooklyn. This property was beautiful in Prospect Heights. There were like 9 offers on the table. We went above asking price. It was a cash offer, which was great. But we also included a letter stating my buyer is a teacher, wants to live in the neighborhood so she can be near her school and walk to work. Well, it just so happened that the seller was also a teacher, right? And again, these things happen sometimes. And again, there are many things that people connect on, where they work, what they do, places they volunteer. And so sending this letter could help your offer. Not all the time, but it definitely can sometimes. We won out even though we were a little bit less than the highest offer. Just because of that, we were cash also, which is helpful. So there are other forms and pieces of documentation that need to be sent along with the offer form, right? And when you have all of these things together, this is when we have what I would call a complete offer, right? When I'm working on the other side, on the sales side, if someone's putting in an offer and they don't have all these forms, I'm not presenting it to the owner, right? And I'm not presenting a verbal offer because I need all of this together to have a completed offer that I can actually talk to the seller about. And so what you need is a pre-approval letter, right? And this should be recently dated. Again, the banker or the mortgage broker will be providing that to you, or proof of funds if it's a cash offer, right? And so if you have a cash offer, what they can do is they can give a recent bank statement that has more than the purchase price in the account, or a statement from the CPA saying, hey, so-and-so has a liquid assets of over $3 million or whatever. And then you don't need the pre-approval form because it's a cash offer. If it's a co-op, you always need the the revenue financial statement, right? And that's the form that we talked about before. It's an asset liability statement because these people want to make sure that the income and assets of the purchaser match what the co-op is looking for. Even if it's a cash offer, right? Because again, the co-op's going to be looking at the financials and stuff like that. And as I mentioned before, the letter from the purchaser can be very helpful, especially if it's a primary residence, right? And so this documentation will be submitted in an email to the seller's agent, right? I always follow up with a call. Hey, Joe, I just wanted to let you know, I just sent you over an offer. If you can review it, present it to the owner, and then we can talk more. There's usually a back and forth, right? Let's say it's a $1 million purchase price. You put an offer at $950. They come back at $975. Your people say, okay, $960. They come back at $965. Boom, you're at $965 accepted. Great, right? You've gotten through the first stage of this in terms of getting an offer accepted, and you're now at the accepted offer stage. This is just an example of an offer email that I sent, right? That I've sent before. Hello, Kathy, right? The other broker. I'm authorized on behalf of my clients, John Jacobs and Pietro Carlos, to offer $1.7 million for apartment 5 at 44 Sullivan Street. They will be putting down 20% and obtaining financing from Chase Bank for the remaining 80% of the purchase. They are able to close extremely quickly and have an attorney selected. Their pre-approval and revenue form is attached. Great, right? Or this should say pre-approval and revenue form are attached. So that's a little wrong on my part. But again, I'm going to skip this highlighted part for a second, go back to it. John and Pietro are longtime NYC residents and would make an amazing addition to the community at 44 Sullivan. They're currently living in a rental at 25 Central Park West and are excited to make a move back to Soho. Thanks so much, and I look forward to putting this deal together. All the best, Jason, right? So this is a letter that I actually sent. I changed the numbers and all that stuff, but to someone, right? And so these are all the terms and things like that. The part I have here highlighted is if you're potentially working with a new development, right? And again, we'll get into this. We're going to be talking about new developments at one of our trainings in the next 2 weeks. There are different fees that a purchaser of a new development, right, which is like a, either a ground up building or a conversion building. There are many of these, right, where you're buying from a sponsor, and it's a little bit different of a process to purchase that. But in this case, we were asking the sponsor, the developer, to pay all of the New York State and city closing costs, right? If your buyer is purchasing in a new development, there are additional costs. Usually the developer asks them to pay for their attorney fees, which can be anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000. There's also the New York State transfer taxes and things like that, which again can be negotiated, especially these day and age. If you are working with a buyer who's looking at new developments, again, if it's happening right now, just give me a call. We can discuss these. And again, in a training that we'll do either next Tuesday or the Tuesday after, we'll talk about new developments and how that process works as well. So again, that's why I just highlighted that portion, just because that is something that can be negotiated and should be negotiated before, right? If they want closing credits, if they want certain things to be paid for by a different party, if there's a transfer tax, right? Or if there's a flip tax that the buyer pays and they want the seller to pay it, then that has to be put in with the offer. So again, you have an accepted offer. Congratulations, right? That's kind of getting through step 2. Step 3 is to put the deal sheet together and to get the contract material done so that the attorneys can start their job. In New York City, an accepted offer does not take a property off the market. And let me repeat that again. An accepted offer does not take a property off the market. There's another step, the deal sheet, the contract prep, until you get to the signing, where that property is still available, right? A listing agent and the seller's agent should still be showing that property. Other bids could come in higher than yours, and that could mess up your deal, right? And so from accepted offer to contract signing, you want that to happen in a pretty expedient manner. These days, because of COVID, it's taking about 2 weeks, 10 days from accepted offer to your buyer signing the contract. Previously, it would take 5 to 7 business days, but because the management companies are often working remotely, it's taking a little bit more time. So the first step is that a deal sheet is put together, and I'll show you, I think it's on the next page, what a deal sheet looks like. There are many terms to call this exact same set of information, right? It's a deal sheet, it's a term sheet, it's a sales sheet, it's an offer acceptance sheet, right? Whatever it is, it's information that is all of the facts that are being used and all of the terms that are being used by the attorneys to negotiate the contract, right? As agents, we've put together the deal in theory, and now the attorneys put it together in a legally binding contract. So what happens is that you, as the buyer's broker, will send your side of the deal sheet to the seller's broker, right? And your side of the deal sheet, and again, I'm just going to show you over here what this kind of looks like, would be this buyer side here on the right, right? And so what it is it's going to be the buyer's name and address, right? The social securities you never put on this form, even though it asks for it, their real estate attorney and their contact information, and your brokerage information. So, right, your name, your information, and the firm's license number and your license number, right? So you fill out this portion of it. Or again, I usually, when I'm working with the buyer, I just put this in the body of an email. Dear Joe, here's our side of the deal sheet. And again, you put the buyer's name, the attorney's name and info, your name, Weikert's info, 2 license numbers, send it over to the seller, and the seller will put everything else together, right? The seller's broker will fill out this portion of the deal sheet, right? The seller's information, their attorney, their broker, their information, whoever the managing agent is for the building, and all of this information here. And again, there's a blank version of this. I'll send it out to you guys again. We're working on getting the new version of this up in the Dropbox file and stuff like that. But this has all of the terms in which the attorneys can use to put together the contract, right? At this point, we're kind of here as support. We are not negotiating the contract, right? That's being done by the attorneys at this point. We've already negotiated the main terms, the sale price, the closing date, who's paying what fees, if there are anything being negotiated, right? And so this is when the attorneys sort of take over. The attorney for the buyer will then review all pertinent information for the building and for the unit, right? And there's a couple things that they will collect in terms of the due diligence that they're doing, right? And this process is to make sure that your buyer is protected, both in terms of the wording of the contract, as well as in the building itself, right? And so there's a few terms here that I just want to go over. because you'll hear them, and it's great to get a sense of them now. So the first is a questionnaire, right? And a questionnaire is a list of questions that are asked by the buyer's attorney to the management company. And it's usually like, when was the building built? Are there any assessments coming up, right? And an assessment is additional payments that have to be paid by a shareholder or a unit owner. When was the boiler replaced? When was the elevator replaced? When was local law 11 done, right? It's all these things to get a better sense for the buyer about the financial health of the building, right? When did the maintenance increase? What is the maintenance? How many shares are here, right? This is paid for by the buyer. It's usually somewhere between $150 and $300. The attorney will send this. They'll get all the answers to it, and it's something that they use to make sure that everything is going well with the building and stuff like that. There's also a set of documents called an offering plan, right? And that goes over how the building was formed, right? Whether it was a ground up construction or a rental building that turned into a co-op or condo, there's an offering plan, and there are usually amendments to the offering plan which go over the entire building, right? And so the attorney will also review that. Those documents are provided by the seller or the seller's broker to the buyer's attorney. Building financials, right? And so they'll look at usually the last 2 to 3 years of audited financials for the building, right? So again, if they're buying something this year, they're probably looking at the 2018 and 2019 financials and probably the 2020 budget, right? Because they're probably still working on actually auditing those financials. They'll look at the house rules, right? What are the rules that govern the building? They'll look at the sales packet, right? This is what we call the board package. And they want to make sure that, what they need to do, any fees and stuff like that. And again, you'll work on this packet in one of the next steps, but they'll also look at that. And they'll also look at the sublease package, right? Or any other documents that are vital to the building, right? Again, these are all things that the attorney is doing. And at this stage, we're kind of just there for support and helping the attorney gather this information, right? Just being in touch with our buyers to make sure that if they have any questions, we answer them or we help them find the answer to it, right? But really, this stage of the contract prep is really handled by the attorneys. Again, the offer and acceptance sheet and stuff like that. So once everything is worked out, right? The attorneys reviewed all the due diligence material. The contract is finalized, agreed on by all parties. The next phase that we're going into is the contract signing, right? And so the steps are usually that the buyer will sign the contract and they will put down the contract deposit, right? And that is usually 10%. Doesn't have to be 10%. It can be less, it can be more. Who knows? It just depends on, again, what is agreed to by the attorneys and things like that. The important thing to remember is that this is different than the down payment amount, right? The contract deposit is the amount put down by the buyer at contract signing. And if they decide to walk away, they can potentially lose that, right? That is different than the down payment. And the down payment is the amount that is paid by them between the contract deposit plus whatever else they put down at the closing, right? So it could be, again, 10% at contract deposit. They're putting down another 10% at the closing. And that way it's 20% down, they're getting financing for 80%, right? So it's important, again, to remember that this is different than the down payment and start using these terms, separately. Contract deposit is the amount that is paid at the contract signing by the buyer. The down payment is the amount that they're putting down total before they close or when they close on the property, right? So the buyer signs, they put down the contract deposit, the seller signs, and then the contract is distributed to the buyer and the seller's attorney, right? It is at this point when it is fully executed that you are in contract, right? At that point, the seller can't really take other offers, right? The seller's agent should probably stop showing because the property is in contract, right? And again, until that point, anything can happen to the deal. The buyer can walk away, the seller can accept another offer. Once it's in contract, that becomes more difficult and the deal is more secure, right? So the next step, so as soon as you're in contract, this is when we're going to start the mortgage and board approval stages, right? And so what happens? The contract is signed. It is then sent over to the mortgage officer or mortgage banker, right? And that mortgage officer will order an appraisal, right? The bank has to bring someone in to make sure that whatever the purchase price is what the value is. The appraisal will happen. And the appraisal will come in and evaluate the purchase price and look at comps in the neighborhood, what's sold, what hasn't, what's on the market. If it appraises for the number that you're buying or for higher, then you continue on, right? If it doesn't appraise, then, and again, this can happen. It's happened a couple times in the last few months. Then either you need another appraisal, which can be requested, or you find a different bank, which again, they can bring someone in to do the same thing, or you need to change the purchase price, right? And again, this is kind of a 2.0 lesson. We don't have to get into this now. Most appraisals come in 100% accurately. And if they don't, we can usually fix them. So really don't worry about this too much for now. But that is what happens, right? And the thing that's going to happen simultaneously to the mortgage and all that happening is that the board package is going to be prepared and submitted, right? And so the board package is prepared by the buyer's broker in coordination with the seller's broker, right? These packages will request certain documentation, both for condos and co-ops. Again, we'll do another meeting just specifically on board packages and how to prepare them. They're submitted to the management company with various fees, credit check fees, move-in fees, whatnot. And then if it's a condo, the building will waive their right of first refusal. And so what that means is that the condo is saying, we don't want to buy it for the price that you have it in contract for. In the case of a co-op, they will usually schedule a board interview. Again, the management company will schedule it. Most of the time, these are over Zoom these days. And they'll meet with the person, and usually within a couple of days to a week, you'll get an answer, yes or no, right? And a co-op can reject anyone for any reason that they want to, or they can accept someone for any reason they want to. I've had it recently where they actually didn't even ask for an interview, right? They just accepted them. Once you have board approval, then we move on to the next stage, which is closing, right? And so board approval, great. They say, we've waived the right of first refusal. We've accepted the application. Again, for a condo, they're waiving the right of first refusal. For a co-op, they're accepting the sale of the shares. The closing is then scheduled by the two attorneys, right? And so they work out a time frame that works for both the buyer and the seller. The morning of or the day before, you are going to be doing a walkthrough with your buyers, right? And what the walkthrough does is it confirms that everything is there that should be. There's no damage, appliances work, and things like that. And then you go to the closing, right? And again, these days we usually don't go to the closing. We are there virtually. We're there for a phone call if they need anything. Again, the attorneys are really quarterbacking that whole portion of it. But we go and we pick up our check, or we're wired the funds and things like that. And then you guys get paid. Great. Congratulations on the closing. After the closing, and again, to me, this is one of the most important stages, right? You want to keep in touch with your client, right? You want to get them a closing gift. And I tend to not bring it to the closing. I send it to them a week later. So it's a great touch point with that client, right? You want to follow up. How did the move-in go, right? Did you get your keys? Was everything great? How are you liking the apartment a month or two later? You also want to ask them for a review, right? And I always do it through Zillow. I get a review from my buyers on Zillow. And again, another thing that you can do, and one of the agents just did this, is you can do just sold marketing, right? Let's say you sold a building with 50 units in it, and you brought the buyer, and they paid a really great price. You can send a just sold marketing and say, I brought the buyer into this building. If you are thinking about selling, I have other people looking. If you do, or if you don't, use my white curtain and find some people who want to buy it and stuff like that. So again, that is basically the steps from starting the search and doing a buyer consultation, which again, I've put it on here, all the way through closing, right? And I'm going to send these slides out so you guys can get a better sense of it, right? It's really a fairly simple, straightforward, and again, it's basically six steps, right? They can seem daunting. There can be a lot that happens, right? No deal is the same. Let me tell you that, right? And I should have Susanna mute herself at some point once we're done and share some of her stories, but you never know what's going to happen, right? And so there are things that get in the way. Don't ever fret, because we have a lot of experience, right? I've been doing this for 13 years. Suzanne's been doing this for 51 years at this point. We've got lots of people who are experienced and can help you through any little hiccup that happens. And let me tell you, hiccups do happen, will happen, right? They don't necessarily always happen, but there are always little things. We work through them, right? And that's why we get paid the big bucks, because we help people navigate this complex process, which is even more complex in New York than it is in any other state, because we have the added bonus of having fun with board packages and things like that. Again, I'm here to help you guys with any questions that you have. I'm going to stop my slideshow. And yeah, I'd love to open it up to questions people have. I can go back to any slides. I can kind of clarify anything that you might be unsure of. And again, at some point, Suze, I'd love for you to tell any fun anecdotes that you might have about some crazy closings or anything like that. Anyone have any questions? Got to be something. I'm going to stop the recording so you guys don't have to worry about. Thank you, guys.